to explain why today. So, please share at this time. But let me see if I can get into this so we can get out of here. Get done in a good time. First thing I want to talk to you about is that God originally created humans to be vulnerable. A part of humanity's original creation is vulnerability. It wasn't until sin that vulnerability became an issue. It wasn't until sin that vulnerability became an issue. Before the fall, Adam and Eve were naked and not ashamed. After the fall, they saw their nakedness and shame was the result. Before the fall, it was all good. After the fall, something shifted and vulnerability, the exposure, the vulnerability, produced a thought of hiding. Bible says they took some fig leaves and sewed them together and covered themselves. Watch this, not just from each other, but from themselves. They saw themselves differently and covered themselves up so that not only would the other not see, but so that when they looked down and around, they wouldn't see it themselves. Their look didn't change. How they saw changed. Sin distorts our perception. Sin distorts our perception. So what was considered acceptable is now unacceptable because how they saw themselves changed. It's not that the way they looked changed, but how they saw themselves changed. So before the fall, vulnerability was the norm. After the fall, hiding became the norm. So they sew fig leaves together to hide from themselves, hide from each other. And then when the voice of the Lord shows up, instead of them coming out to meet God, they hide among the trees. So they're hiding from themselves, hiding from each other, and then hide from God. Because when you live in shame, I don't want to see raw me. I don't want other people to see raw me. And I try to run from God because I don't want him to see raw me, even though he can see it. I ain't talking about physical vulnerability. I'm talking about just vulnerability in general. I'm talking about this metaphorical. So shame will have you living in fear of exposure and vulnerability. And we often perceive that people see something about us because we see it. So what do they start doing? In sin, we start to hide from ourselves. I don't like it, and I don't want you to think the same thing about me. So I hide from me and hide from you. They looked at their own person and were ashamed of what they saw. Self-reflection is a revealer. Self-reflection is a revealer, both good and bad. Because as you start looking at you, analyzing yourself, you start discovering the stuff you do like about you and the stuff you don't like about you. And if you keep it real with yourself, there are some things about your personality, your characteristics, your feelings, your thought process, etc., that you like, and some things that you don't, right? So in this self-reflective mirror, this revealer, right, that Adam and Eve now have, they take these fig leaves, and they make clothes to hide from themselves. Because here's the thing, not only were they ashamed of what they saw in themselves, but they were ashamed of what they saw in each other because they were a mirror. Wow, we are exposed, and seeing you is seeing me. So they make clothes. Now here's the interesting thing. Clothes are a result of sin. Clothes are a result of sin. In scripture, clothes also represent identity. Clothing represents identity. So when I put what I put on, identifies a part of who I am. Whew. So they are known, watch this, by their covering rather than who they really are. So part of Adam and Eve knowing each other was them living covered, right? In shame of what they saw. So they're known by their covering rather than who they really are, which means if we're realistic here, we're really not having a relationship with the real person. We're having a relationship with the representation of what the person wants to portray. Oh boy. So people, watch this, will have a relationship with our representative rather than who we are. We present ourselves in a way that we think is acceptable, only to cover up who we really are, crazily get into a relationship, which relationships reveal, hoping that the person will never see the real me. Now, I'm not saying that, you just beat somebody, you show them everything and tell them all your business and reveal. That's foolish. I'm talking about over time, relationships challenge shame. Whew. Over time, relationships challenge shame. Because the closer you get to somebody, the more the demand for exposure and vulnerability happens. And it's not that the person is necessarily asking, but the flow of the relationship and the demands of commitment start to pull on that area of shame where if I'm going to be with this person, I have to be able to be comfortable around this person in the areas of my shame. Again, I'm not saying you got to reveal yourself to everybody and everything, but here's my thing. At least be real with yourself. At least be honest with who you are. Don't let the fig leaves hustle you from who you really are. And stop calling it something that it's not. I'm not jealous. I'm just possessive. I'm not, I have an anger issue. I'm just passionate. Just call it what it is. I struggle with these things. But when I live in shame, fig leaves become my identity. Most people have a relationship with their representative, so they don't have to face who they really are and how they see themselves. So watch this. Not only do we make other people have a relationship with our representative, we start having a relationship with our own representative. And our mask becomes our identity. And we start relating to ourselves based off of who we want to be rather than who we are. I say it like this: fake it till you make it. You start believing the fake it, right? This is who I am. You meet people, why are you dealing with so much anger? I ain't angry. And when they say I'm not angry, it comes out angry. It's trying to live in denial of who I really am. Because why? I'm afraid of being exposed. And here's the thing. If you can't face you, you'll find it hard for others to face you. And you'll find it hard to let other people see you the way that you really see yourself. It's called projection. I'm almost done. In sin, we project our shame and hide from others. In sin, we project our shame and hide from others. We don't like it. We don't like the thing about us. So we assume that others feel the same way. I don't like it. I find it unacceptable. So I also believe that you will find it unacceptable. So I don't want to look weak, so I act like I'm always strong. I don't want to look like, X, Y, and Z. Rather than understanding that all of us have weak moments. I don't want to, the perception, and I'm not perception, it matters. I'm not saying, you can expose yourself to everybody or act one type of way and act like you're not that way. But what I am saying, at least be real with yourself. And in the right relationships, don't assume that people will find a thing unacceptable because you find it unacceptable. Because what we do is we think if I don't like it, they won't like it either. So I try to cover it up, act like it's not there, not recognizing the person actually sees it. Now, here's the problem with constantly trying to cover something that's just blatantly obvious to somebody that you're in a close relationship with. I ain't talking about a stranger, somebody in a close relationship with. They're okay with it. You're not. And instead of us saying, okay, the person's okay with it, let me calm down and relax some, we keep trying to draw attention to it by how much we don't like it, not realizing that the more you draw attention to it, the more the other person is going to look at you and say, right? You know what? You are right. That is an issue. They were fine with it. They were okay with it. But if you keep drawing attention to it, it can become an issue. Let me move on. So let's get back to Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve were comfortably vulnerable before the fall. After the fall, their own discomfort led to hiding. The fear of vulnerability is real. Because why? I don't want you to see what I see. Because I think if you see it, you won't accept me. You'll reject me like I reject myself. Rather than asking the person or seeing if it's okay, we assume for the individual and end up missing out on or end up missing out on a possibly good thing because we assume the other person, A, can't handle it, B, is going to reject it. And the fear is there. And it's real. But the crazy thing is this. People that have trust issues, people that have vulnerability issues, demand it from others while living behind a mask. People that are in a situation, they demand trust, demand vulnerability from others while they live behind the mask. I want you to expose you to me, but I should be allowed to hide because you don't understand. The fear is if they see it, they won't accept me. Here's the thing, y'all. The right person will have the right love for you and can navigate your life history and who you are. And guess what? If somebody doesn't have that right type of love, they're not for you. And guess what? It's okay. It's okay. Everyone isn't supposed to have the right type of love for you. It's fine. People have a right to their preference. People have a right to what they want out of life. And if you're not their preference, don't feel bad about it. It's all good. They don't have the right type of love for you. It's fine. And we don't do the whole, well, they don't know what they missing and they so-and-so. People have a right to their preference. Okay? I'm not talking about, this crazy hurting behavior, right? But people have a right to their preference. Now when we qualify this statement, when we're talking about vulnerability and actions and stuff like that, I'm not talking about crazy behavior that's hurting people or abusive behavior. I'm not talking about making people accept stuff that's going to damage a person, damage a relationship. I ain't talking about that at all. I'm talking about us having flaws, which everybody has. And those flaws aren't abusive or damaging. It's things we can work with. All of us have, those traits where in a relationship, I cannot deal with these traits in a person. But these traits we can rock with. It ain't a big deal. It ain't going to hurt the relationship. Some people, liars, they just cannot do it. Cannot be around somebody that lies all the time, right? That's a cutoff. Everybody has a right to their preference in what they can and what they're willing to deal with. Just be honest. But the issue, going back to it, the real issue is this, is if I don't feel okay with me, I think everybody else doesn't feel okay with me. If I don't like it, I project other people won't like it. If I don't feel enough, I'll do everything to make sure people feel like I am enough, even though I don't feel like I'm enough. So I got to qualify every single statement to prove who I am, or to, prove that I'm this or something like that. When it's cool, when the need to prove is actually our insecurities crying out, hoping that the person won't see how I really feel, or assuming they feel that way when they don't. So what do I do? Let me move on. Trust, what do I do from this point? Trust leads to vulnerability. The more trust I have with somebody, the more vulnerable I can become around that person. This takes time. Trust is not built overnight. Trust takes time to build. It doesn't happen all at once. It takes years to build and a moment to destroy. So if you want to build vulnerability, build trust. And where there is trust, vulnerability will become automatic. It just starts to happen. You just start sharing information. You just start talking. You start exposing, right? And again, I'm not saying you got to tell every single thing that happened in your life, but where there's trust, you feel comfortable enough sharing. Even if it's a difficult conversation, you feel comfortable enough sharing. And this is shown when the person has proven they can handle the exposure and the vulnerability. Because here's the thing, if once the person reveals that they can't handle the vulnerability, that can shut a door, and the person will never be vulnerable again, or be very sketchy with it, because I've now realized you can't handle what I exposed to you. Vulnerability and trust. Next thing, be real with yourself. And learn to stop defining your whole being on a portion of who you are. Be real with yourself and learn to stop defining your whole being on a portion of who you are. This thing that I don't like about me isn't all of who I am. It's a part of who I am. It exists, it's real, it's there, but I can't define my whole being based off of one area of my life that I don't like. You are more than what brings you shame. Next thing, is your shame based on truth? Woo. Or is it based off perception? Is your shame based on truth, or is it built off perception? Well, what am I trying to tell you? Your reality isn't always the truth. Your reality, your way of seeing it, isn't always true. It's just the way that you see it. But it doesn't mean that's the way that everybody sees it. So is your shame based on a truth, or is it based off just how you see it? Next thing, give people a chance to prove their trust and slowly go from there. Give people a chance to prove their trust, slowly go from there. And that takes time. That takes taking down bricks to see how they manage. If I can take down this brick and they can manage that, cool, let's take down another one. And you're slowly revealing things to somebody you're close to see what they can manage as they have proven that they can be trusted with who you are. And this takes time. Slow down some. Stop rushing it. Watch this. If you can, work on what brings you shame in a healthy way. If you can, work on what brings you shame in a healthy way. When we define our being on what brings us shame, we do unhealthy things to fix it. When we define our being on what brings us shame, we do unhealthy things to fix it. When we don't care, watch this, when you don't care about yourself, you do unhealthy things to get to where you want to be in life. But when you value yourself, you make changes in a healthy way, in a good way that's not detrimental to who you are. Next thing, vulnerability can be scary. It can be scary, but watch this. Vulnerability can bring a whole lot of joy with the right person. It can be very scary, but it can bring a whole lot of joy with the right person. Because here's the thing, last part and I'm done. While you're closing up, so you want to experience disappointment, pain from other people, you're also closing off all the joy that you can experience. While you're fighting not to get hurt, you're also missing out on all the joy that people can bring. So somebody breaking your trust, and we're going to talk about this next month, somebody breaking your trust isn't a lesson to not trust anybody. somebody breaking your trust is a lesson in being careful with who you trust. That's what broken trust is supposed to teach us. So some of us have been vulnerable, and we were vulnerable around the wrong person, and they hurt they hurt our ability to be vulnerable. And now we live closed up. But God wants you to at least be vulnerable with yourself and him. And then over time, the right people will give you the space to be yourself around them. I hope you guys enjoyed this tonight. We'll pick this up next week. And I know I took my time going through this sensitive subject, but we hope and pray that it was a blessing to your life. Don't forget to join us tomorrow night for Bible study at 7 o'clock. We would love to see you, of course, on point on Saturday at 9. We have virtual service at 8 o'clock, in person at 11, and a virtual communion at 6 o'clock on Sunday. But we want you to register. Registration closes for Sunday service tomorrow at 9 o'clock. So come on and see us if you haven't, and we'll be glad to see you all. God bless you. Thank you for joining Focus Singles Ministry. We'll see you next month.